Hello, welcome to Nightmare Flicks. I am Nate. You are you, and everyone's favorite good guy doll, Chucky, has wrapped his first season of TV. And what a wacky, up and down, unpredictable, zany, fun, blood-soaked season it was. Today, as always, we're going to talk about the episode of the week, and that is the finale. And I got my 5 biggest takeaways for you. Got some good, got some bad, and I got some questions for season 2, some things that I want to get resolved that maybe didn't get resolved here. That being said, I do think this was a proper finale. I've heard a lot of other reviewers and talking heads say that this wasn't a proper season finale. I disagree. I feel like we got resolution as far as the story of these kids of Hackensack versus Chucky. I feel like we kind of tied all the things up that we needed to right there and put a little bow on it. We don't even have to bring these kids back for season 2 if we don't want to, even though I think they will. But on top of that, we had just a few dangling threads. We set up a few new little storylines that you're like, whoa, where are they going to go with that? What avenues can we venture down? I think I got some answers for some of these questions. I want to see this happen and this happen. I think that one character might be yada yada. And that's always fun. That keeps you kind of salivating and looking forward to the next season. I think that's just good TV, and I was okay with that. Now, let's talk about everything else I was okay with and what I may not have been okay with my 5 biggest takeaways. Here we go. For my first takeaway, you gotta talk about Chucky. The show is called Chucky. The horror icon at the heart of everything is Chucky. And this episode was chock full of Chucky. And I wouldn't have had it any other way. And a lot of this was really, really good Charles Lee Ray fare. I mean, he was just waxing poetic at times, talking about his master plan and how he feels about certain characters. And he was spewing amazing one-liners that had me laughing my ass off at times. And he looked good in this finale episode. At times in this series, he's looked a little derpy or goofy and just not quite right. And you could tell that maybe that was a budgetary thing. I think they kind of saved a bit of the budget for this climactic episode because he looked freaking right. Like he looked like he should in a feature film, the type of Chucky that we are used to. He really did have the sort of visage that we know of Child's Play 2 and Child's Play 3. He just looked mean and he looked pissed off and he looked ready to kill. And I love that. But also love that we didn't just get more Chucky in terms of screen time. No, we got more Chucky in that we had him in doll form. We had him in possessed Nika form. And we had him in army form. I wasn't the biggest fan of Cult of Chucky, but I couldn't help but be entertained by there being multiple Chuckies and seeing them ping pong off each other and make all sorts of degrading jokes and have this crass humor and to talk about murder the way some of us may talk about, I don't know, great times at a family holiday or something. The guy just lives for it. He loves it. That is his passion. And I love that they put all this in here. We got a bunch of kills. That's what I'm saying. We got everything you want from Chucky. We didn't just get cool Chucky kills. We got cool Chucky being killed. And it was awesome. We got to see him get his head sawed off by Tiffany via a butcher's knife. And just viscera and gore was puddling out of his neck onto the floor. It looked great and it caught me off guard in that moment, but it was all the more better because Chucky is just laughing maniacally as it's all transpiring. Later on, Jake is kind of seizing him by the neck and strangling him, and his eyes are bulging out of his little doll head and the blood is pouring, and it was just so out there, and they're going for it, but they're going for it in a way that I can really appreciate. So I loved everything the final episode of Chucky had to do as it pertains to Chucky. For my second point, when it comes to all things pertaining to Tiffany, just wasn't quite as enthused. In fact, a lot of it kind of set me off a bit. This series, when it comes to the films, it's always been great about its canon and continuing in continuity and not stepping all over itself and retconning like so many other horror franchises do. But we've established a certain narrative, and now we're finding out via flashback that no, despite what you may have thought when you watched the first Child's Play, despite what you found out in Curse of Chucky, no, actually, Tiffany felt a little bit betrayed and hurt by Charles Lee Ray, so she called Mike, and that is how they knew his whereabouts, and that's why he got gunned down in the first Child's Play movie. And it's just like, this show is really supposed to be like a love letter to fans. That's who's supporting you. We know the story. This was only 2 movies ago, and now you are saying, nah, I don't want to do that anymore. It'd be cooler for this one episode, so we're just going to shoehorn this one in here. Don't really like that. Also, don't think it makes sense. While it was fun to see the doll Tiffany make an appearance at long last, that's a cool thing to put in a finale, but it doesn't really make sense to the story because, like, well, what has she been up to this whole time? I mean, there's been so much time spent with Tiffany in an apartment or in a home or just going around town or whatever. So many instances that she would have had that doll with her. I just can't think of any reason why she wouldn't, or what that doll would be doing, where it would be, why we're just now seeing it. That doesn't really make sense. And while it's an awesome, like, whoa, reveal that Tiffany has cut the arms and legs off of Nika, doesn't really bode well going forward, I don't think, because Fiona Dorff has been my favorite part of this season. She's the best actress, or actor, I should say, bar none in this series, at least if you ask me. And now she's going to be restrained to a seated position where she has no legs and no arms, and there's just such a cap on what she can do. Like, one hand is fun and it's zany and it's unexpected and it feels like the end of a classic horror movie where they zoom out and you're like, oh my God, but... And then also, it doesn't make a whole lot of logical sense that we have Tiffany saying she's done with Chucky, pretty much F off Chucky, she saws his head off, and you're like, oh wow. But then she carries out his plan anyway. She saws his head off, pretty much says, F off, I'm done with you. Anyway, I'm gonna go do exactly what you wanted me to. Peace, I'll be back. That doesn't make a lot of sense. For my third point, this is a positive, the horror. Some of these episodes have really lacked any tension, suspense, or scares. Not to say this was a very terrifying episode or anything, but there was at least tension. And you got that in the opening moments where Andy and Junior are having this exchange where they are each kind of on to each other, but they're trying to put up this facade of oh no, I don't know what's going on. No, I'm just a normal kind of well-to-do kid. I have nothing to hide. Oh yeah, my dad's just out. Meanwhile, Andy knows better, and you get the sense that Junior knows that Andy knows better, and you know that Andy knows that Chucky is about, and Junior knows that Andy knows a lot about Chucky, but they're hiding all of this from each other and trying to keep up appearances. It's a nice little bit of tension, and there's irony in that, and I enjoyed that. I also love that we had so many different kills. That's, of course, great, even if some of the kills were a little bit too wacky and out there and just stupid and far-fetched when you think about them. Hey, at least we had it, and I mentioned the gore earlier. Really great gore effects, really great special effects in this episode. That really worked for me. And the homages. Now, this series has done a lot of homaging to older horror, and sometimes it's just too on the nose, it's too blatant, it's too obvious to the point that it feels like they are just ripping it off. I felt like the homages were woven into the story fabric just a little bit more intelligently this go around, and sometimes used to get a laugh, and I really did enjoy that. I'm talking about in that moment where you had Andy and Junior talking in the bathroom. Once Andy leaves, you see Chucky kind of pop up out of the toilet because Andy would never expect him to be hiding there, and it's a callback to The Ghoulies, which is not a movie you see referenced a lot, but hey, that is a fun little illusion. Also, a very intelligent reference is to The Shining, where we see one of the Chuckies and the Chucky army talking about how twins just aren't fair because they have numbers, which is, of course, tongue-in-cheek because Chucky now has numbers and he's complaining about people getting the advantage on him. But, of course, they're talking about the Shining twins. And while this is going on, this atmosphere is super heightened. This was one of the most atmospheric scenes in the entire series, and it's because to the discerning ear, you will hear the score from The Shining, and it is just so impactful, and it resonates, and it adds all this extra power to it. I just love that they were kind of alluding to The Shining, but doing more with it, and they're able to add in a little bit of comedy on top of that while making it feel tense. On to my next point, and you could kind of sum this up as just too much suspension of disbelief, or if you wanted to be a little bit more straightforward and blunt, stupidity. A lot of stupid stuff going down in this final episode, and really right off the bat too, because we get Kyle arriving to Hackensack about the same time as Andy, which doesn't really seem plausible given that Andy kind of abandoned and deserted her, and yet she's getting there right when he did. Really takes all the drama out of that scene from the previous episode. And then we're supposed to believe that Kyle dies via an explosion, which I just don't think anybody is buying that whatsoever. I mean, whatsoever. Do you think Kyle died? No. So basically just giant waste of our time. And then maybe the most you see all packed into one scene has to do with when all the characters are gathered to watch Frankenstein, and Chucky is beneath the theater seats stabbing people in the ass, and they're dying from it. First off, those seats have hard shells on the bottom to where a doll whose arm is cramped like this is not going to be able to generate enough force to go through the hard shell, up through the cushion. And even if he did, the knife's about, this long? Think about that hard shell. Think about the cushion. You get like this much of the little tip of the knife stabbing you in the old butt cheek. You're going to be all right. It is but a flesh wound. You're going to be okay. You're not going to die. You're especially not going to just shut down and be quiet like Lexi's dad did, where he's just sitting there. As much as I love that blood was dripping from his mouth into the popcorn, and you get that gross out gag where the wife reaches over and puts it in her mouth, that was freaking nasty. It doesn't make sense that he would have died from that. It also doesn't make sense that once they are aware of this, people start freaking out and stampeding out of the auditorium, but not everybody. Some people are like, oh, what's all the commotion? I'm watching Frankenstein. This is a good movie. I've never even heard of this. You ever heard of Frankenstein? I don't think so either. It must be an indie picture. They're just sitting there while everyone around them is freaking out. People are dying. One lady has blood all over her chest. Don't know how that happens when she got stabbed in the ass crack. Beats me. But some of these people, because we want a higher body count for when Chucky does his kill count at the end, you know, trying to save James A. Janice sometime, because they want that higher figure, we just got to go along with this, even though those kills aren't really cool. They don't satiate any sort of like gorehound's bloodlust. They just don't make sense. It also doesn't make sense that Lexi's mom would leave Caroline behind in the auditorium. That doesn't work for me at all. Another big problem I had was, what do we need to do to kill a Chucky doll? Because it's getting really, really tough to discern what does kill a Chucky doll. I mentioned earlier that one of them just gets strangled, and he seems to die from that. One gets stabbed in the chest, seems to die from that. But one gets his head sawed off, and he lives. So how do you get your head sawed off, and then another one just gets stabbed in like the stomach and is dead instantly? Does not make sense. I am very befuddled about how all this voodoo works, about how does the mortality of Chucky work? I don't get it. Like, somebody give me that video. How do you kill the Chucky army? What is the best way? If you have like limited supplies or ammo, what is the quickest way to render one dead? I don't know. And for my final point, I mentioned that this episode did leave you with some questions. So let's address some of my questions. 1, will these kids be back? Will the kids of Hackensack be back? I tend to think that they will be. But who was watching the kids at the cemetery? Who did that leather-clad hand belong to? Gotta believe it is Kyle, right? She survived the explosion. She was donning a whole lot of leather beforehand, so that's probably her checking in. But who else was at that cemetery? Why is the teacher, who has red hair and has this mysterious background where she's committed a crime in her past, apparently, and we know that Glenn/Glinda is out there. Could this be Glenn or Glinda in human form? I don't know. That could be an interesting little reveal. What's going to happen with Andy? We see him being held at gunpoint by the Tiffany doll. He's driving a truck with 72 Chuckies on it. How's he going to escape that predicament? Will the Chucky dolls be ruined? Will they be able to get away from Andy and thus run amok? A whole entire army of Chuckies running amok. Is that something we are going to see in season 2? And of course, poor Nika. What is going to happen with the Nika character? What are we going to do with this woman who's essentially now just a head and a torso? Those are some of my questions. If you have any ideas, feel free to comment them down below. I will talk to you down there. Let me know your thoughts on the season. If you love Chucky and you love horror and you are new to this channel, you enjoyed this video, please go ahead and hit subscribe so you can get more of this content. Other than that, I hope you have a fantastic day. I'm Nate for Nate Merflick saying that's a wrap.